Support for Mission Nonprofit is provided by Thurston Talk.
This program is provided in the public interest by Thurston Community Media. More information at tcmedia.org.
Protecting the Nisqually River and surrounding watershed are essential to our region's environmental health. Stay tuned to learn more about the Nisqually River Foundation's work to protect and improve this vital ecosystem on this episode of Mission Nonprofit. Welcome to Mission Nonprofit. I'm Deborah Vinsel. Today our guest is the Executive Director of the Nisqually River Foundation, Justin Hall. Thanks for taking time to be with us today.
My pleasure.
Good. So the foundation, to kind of start off with, there's the Nisqually River Council and there's the Nisqually River Foundation, and you're the Executive Director of the foundation. Can you share with us a little bit about the two organizations, how they're different, how they work together, their history, and why they exist?
Yeah, happy to. So the Nisqually River Council was created by the legislature in 1989 after a 2-year Nisqually River Task Force, and it was just, Nisqually's thought of as a special place, and so it needed some kind of greater level of scrutiny and protection perhaps and promotion. And so in doing that, they created the River Council, and then they staffed it and funded it via the legislature through the Department of Ecology. And so for the first for the first 15 years or so, it was funded through the Department of Ecology, but through some budget cuts and staffing changes, that funding fell away. And so for a couple years, they had no funding. And the River Council had a kind of a chance of disappearing, because everyone who's on the council worked for somebody else or is a citizen, and they didn't have the time to really dedicate towards that. So the Nisqually tribe, working with a nonprofit called Stewardship Partners out of Seattle, got a grant from the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife to re-establish staffing for the River Council. And I was hired into that position. I actually worked for the tribe for a few months. But as we looked at the long term of how should we fund this council, how should we staff it, the idea of a nonprofit really made the most sense. We can apply for grants, we can take donations, we can work under contract, and we're not part of any of the 24 state, local, or federal agencies that are part of the River Council. We're independent, but our job is to provide the staffing and the project management and the funding for the activities of the Nisqually River Council as it implements the Nisqually Watershed Stewardship Plan, which is its guiding document now.
So you're the Nisqually River Foundation, and your charge is to help protect and steward the Nisqually watershed. So what constitutes the Nisqually watershed?
So a watershed is the entire area of land that if a drop of water falls on it, it'll eventually make its way out the bottom of the Nisqually River. So we start at the top of Mount Rainier and through the Couts and Nisqually glaciers, all the way down through Alder Lake, through Eatonville area, Joint Base Lewis McChord, out through the Billy Frank Jr. Nisqually National Wildlife Refuge. So we're bordered by the Puyallup on the north and then the Deschutes on the south.
That's a lot of land.
It's about 78 square miles. We're actually a pretty small watershed as far as watersheds go, if you think of the Columbia or something like that. But we claim to be the only one that starts in a national park and ends in a national wildlife refuge. So nobody's told me otherwise.
There you go. So you have the Nisqually River Council, which establishes the stewardship plan and policies around that, and the foundation. And you work closely together because the foundation provides staffing and funding for the plans that the council puts forward, correct?
Correct, yeah. So the River Foundation was created to be that organization that could provide staffing and program management and project management for the activities of the Nisqually River Council as it implements its Nisqually Watershed Stewardship Plan. Everybody else works for either, like I said, a federal, state, local, or tribal agency. And then we have a Citizens Advisory Committee made up of really interested stakeholders that just have a passion for the watershed. And the River Council meets monthly on the third Friday of every month and talks about issues in the Nisqually watershed. Our Citizens Advisory Committee meets the second Tuesday of every month. And so it's a forum, really, and we've been around, like I said, for 35 plus years, and we've worked on specific projects, but really the true gem of the Nisqually River Council is this opportunity to talk monthly with the folks that are actually doing stuff on the ground. So if it's a wildlife issue, we have the WDFW wildlife biologist. If there's something going on with the military, we have a Department of Defense JBLM representative. If it's around power, we have to come with public utilities because they have 2 dams on the river. So it's an opportunity to really get to know each other, build a culture of trust that really helps when it comes to doing the big projects like the restoration of the Nisqually watershed or the upcoming changes to I-5.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about projects. I took a look at your website, and there's a lot of projects listed there. So let's talk a little bit about that. What are the projects you're working on?
You bet. And so the River Council is its own mission, everything else, and like I said, the foundation works to support the River Council's mission, but really what our job is to foster a healthy watershed, a healthy Nisqually watershed through creating partnerships, engaging volunteers, and providing educational opportunities. And that kind of speaks to our programs. Our number one kind of gold star program is that we work with all of the schools of the watershed through our Nisqually River Education Project, where we provide field-based science experiences in support of the next-gen science standards for any of the schools of the watershed. So we'll get students out into the field. We pay for substitutes if they need it. We pay for busing, provide all the materials. So right now we're out actually doing water quality testing around 30 different sites in the watershed with a bunch of different schools where they go out and test all the parameters of the creeks, so the main stem Nisqually, and they can use that as a learning experience of how to do kind of that hard science where you're figuring out what the dissolved oxygen is or the nitrates are, but also learning about why things might be good or why things might be bad. And then we bring all that data together. They test twice, once in the spring, once in the winter, and bring them all together at what we call the Green Congress, which is held at Evergreen State College in the spring in March. And they share their data, and then they get a chance to go out and experience, if they want to learn fly casting or something about shellfish, there's all these different educational opportunities. We follow that up in the fall with salmon carcass dissection, sometimes visits to our hatcheries. The Nisqually has 2 hatcheries, and all of the excess carcasses after the milk and eggs are taken are frozen to remove a parasite, and then we thaw them out and we return those carcasses to parts of the watershed that used to see strong salmon runs but aren't anymore because those marine-derived nutrients provide sustenance to like 126 different species. And so we go out and literally toss the carcasses, they thaw them out and toss them into those areas, and it's definitely the highlight of any 5th grader's year when they get to go out and do that. Yep, throwing fish is the best. We do Eye on Nature, where we take them to the Billy Frank Jr. Nisqually National Wildlife Refuge, and they spend time listening to the soundscape of nature, mapping where they're seeing things so they can see how a biologist might figure out what habitats are being used, doing bird identification, things like that. So it's just a really wide variety of programming that we do. The other one in the fall is tree planting. So we'll work with the Nisqually Land Trust and the Nisqually Tribe to do restoration activities. And so the often on land trust property, not always. And then the tribe helps lay out a restoration plan with the land trust and lay out all the plants. And then we bring the students in and show them the proper way to use a shovel and dig a hole and plant a tree and then protect it from browse. And that's always a great opportunity, and just a couple hours out, rain or shine, to be out getting your hands in the dirt. And so it's really we've been doing the program since the late 80s, and we calculated we've had over 30,000 students come through, and we're actually at a point now where we're seeing people come to the River Council and say, I'm doing my career because I got to participate in the Nisqually River Education Project. The Public Works Director in Yelm, is somebody who came through our program. We've had others, and so it's that neat kind of qualitative data that you can say that, look, this is having an impact.
That full circle moment,
Yep.
Where what we did came back around to serve the community again.
Exactly. We do help run the water planning. So there's there was the called the Hearst decision. I know they're calling it something else now, but about exempt wells, and so we bring together all of the water users. So cities Olympia and Lacey. Olympia gets most of their water from the Nisqually watershed. Lacey gets some of theirs, and Yelm and the tribe, and talk about water issues and how we're going to make sure we provide enough clear, cool water for salmon in the stream, but also people that need it. One of our more recent projects has been strong involvement in the Nisqually Community Forest, which in partnership with the Land Trust and now the Nisqually Community Forest is its own nonprofit, and the Nisqually Tribe, we've been purchasing industrial forest lands in the watershed and keeping them as working forests, but changing the regime of forestry to help make sure we have more water, to just going into multiple thinnings instead of large clear cuts. And so just having a different set of goals. And so we purchased over 5,500 acres between the community forest and the tribe, and managing those together up above Ashford, and providing local jobs, and taking the wood to local mills. So it's, there's just been a wide variety of things we get to do, and it's always something new. It's a lot of fun.
I think a lot of people might not consider forestry integral to water, so the fact that those are all the different kinds of things that the Nisqually River Foundation works on to protect and steward that watershed is really interesting. Tell me, how many staff do you have to do this? Sounds like these sound like huge projects. So how many staff do you have?
We generally have 4 staff, 2 for the education project, 1 running the River Council, and myself as executive director, and I work a lot in the forest stuff and on other projects. We have 5 right now. We had some extra funding, so we were able to hire someone to help with the education project. And then we usually have 1 or 2 AmeriCorps and sometimes some Evergreen interns. So it's small staff, but we plug into all of our partner organizations, the Nisqually Reach Nature Center, the Nisqually Land Trust, Billy Frank Jr. Nisqually National Wildlife Refuge. So we really are about partnerships. We can't do it all, but we can leverage the resources to make sure that things that we want to get done happen.
So they're volunteers, they're staff, they're come in and participate in the projects. So tell me about the watershed plan, and the need for it, and how it came about.
So the Nisqually, in its long history, has faced various threats. There was a time when they wanted to put a Seattle dump in the Nisqually estuary, basically. There was another point when they looked at building a superport in the Nisqually for oil and gas. So it would have been like a Cherry Point south. At one point there was going to be a log export facility, which is now in downtown Olympia. And so in the kind of the 70s and 80s, folks looked at these kind of potential threats to the watershed and said that this is a special place. I think it helps that most of our legislators drive across the Nisqually watershed and on their way to the legislature. So the Dan Evans administration created the first plan for the watershed, and it was kind of created in Olympia and put on a shelf. But the great thing that came out of it is that the Billy Frank Jr. Nisqually National Wildlife Refuge, that the Brown farm, who had diked up the estuary and used it as a dairy and whatnot, was getting out of farming, and so the idea that it should be in permanent protection came out of that first plan. And then through the efforts that we've had, that initial effort, there was an idea that we should create a task force to look at the watershed. We're fortunate that we are a small watershed and we have some great partners. That what can we do to kind of keep this the special place that it is? It's a kind of a rural watershed smack dab between Tacoma and Olympia. We have a nice agricultural component with Wilcox Farms and Stiver's Eggs. We're one of the largest producers of eggs in our watershed. And so, we were also fortunate that we had Billy Frank Jr., as an advocate, and he worked, we have a great story with Jim Wilcox, one of the current patriarchs of Wilcox Farms, that Billy said, we want you here, we want Weyerhaeuser here, we just want to make sure that we also have fish so that we can do what we've always done traditionally, we can have those fish for us, but it's not at the expense of the businesses of the watershed. And he just was such a transformational leader that he just brought people on board whether they wanted to or not. He just had that way about him, and so he really helped us kind of bring everybody rowing in mostly the same direction. Not always, not everything's perfect and easy, but we've got that, like I said, that long history that really allows the River Council and the foundation to work with all of our partners to kind of achieve the goals we want to do. And everything we do is voluntary. We have no legislative authority, and that was really important at the very beginning of the River Council, that we're going to help find ways that work, for you and for us, that classic win-win.
Yeah, I had the great privilege to meet Billy Frank Jr. on multiple occasions, so I know
Same.
exactly what you're saying when you say he had that way of just bringing people to a place where you could find consensus.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, great. So was the council involved in the removal of the dikes at the Reach?
So not directly,
Yeah.
because again, it's that ability to be a forum for discussion.
Mm-hmm.
And so Gene Takakawa, the refuge manager at that time, once said to me that without the River Council, we wouldn't have removed the dikes,
Right.
because it allowed the conversation with the refuge and the tribe and WDFW, and eventually they brought in Ducks Unlimited as another nonprofit to manage that work. And we were able to help leverage federal funding and tribal funding and funding from other watersheds, because the Nisqually estuary is important for fish throughout South Sound, and even from mid-Sound. Puyallup fish come down and use the watershed. Through research, we've shown that, and 50% of the fresh water that comes into South Sound comes in the Nisqually. So it's really an estuary of regional significance. And so I believe that, without that forum and ability to talk about things, that it might have happened, but it would have been a lot more difficult.
So what's the future of the plan? Are there how is the plan and any work on the I-5? How do those intersect?
Of course, yeah. So, the Nisqually Land Trust has been amazingly successful in preserving the riparian areas of the watershed. Between that and the Nisqually Reservation and Joint Base Lewis McChord and Tacoma Public Utilities, I think we're up to 78% of the riparian areas in some sort of permanent protection. And that's why we've moved into kind of the uplands and the community forest. I'd like to say, you mentioned earlier, you don't think of forest and water, but salmon aren't an ocean species, they're a forest species. They're born in the forest, they have their young years in the forest, and then we kick them out as teenagers and they go out to the ocean and find their own way, and then they come back to have their own babies in the forest. And so the forests really are critical and so important. And research has shown that young trees are kind of like straws. They suck water out of the aquifer and transpire it up into the air, and it comes down as rain, but not necessarily back in our watershed. And so if we can increase the age of the trees, the average age of trees in the watershed, we can have more water in those really hot summers and those refugia for fish. So remind me of the question
I-5.
again.
How does the plan intersect with I-5?
So,
Yeah.
So I'm way upstream in the community forest, but it's all about having water, cold, clear water in the river for salmon. And so I-5, I was at the University of Washington's Pack Forest, which is also a member of the River Council, in 1996 when we had that large flood. And I-5 at that point acted as an earthen dam. And so the waters receded beyond I-5 much quicker than they did after it, because there's only 3 holes through I-5 to let water out and flooding. And it also is constricting the way the river wants to move. Rivers are naturally move throughout their basin.
Yep. They flow downhill.
They flow downhill, but they're
Yeah.
moving right and left as they go, and we've constrained them with riprap, big rocks and bridges and things like that. And right now, the river wants to do what it wants to do, which is kind of make a new channel, which would go right through I-5 and then potentially shut down transportation on the critical north-south freeway, for California to British Columbia. And it's also just changing how the habitat is for salmon. So, we are going to be involved in the iPride project. We're not directly again, but we'll be a big part of the public outreach and the public comment for that. And, as we work towards salmon recovery and the other things of the watershed, if we can see that, most of that put up onto a bridge, that'll allow that river to move, and it'll also allow restoration of McAllister Creek, which if you ever go down into Billy Frank Jr., you'll see it's just sandbagged and has been for decades, into a channel. So it just allows the river to be a little bit healthier and allow it to do those processes that you want to do.
Is there a timeline for that?
Yes, but like all timelines, it's currently in NEPA, so National Environmental Protection Act review, and so that's got another 30 days, and then a decision will come out, and then people may or may not decide to challenge that decision in court, and then once it's through the review, and we will have chosen a preferred alternative, and then we have to find funding, and it's not a cheap project. We would say it's kind of the most expensive, but fortunately they're trying to replace our bridge over the Columbia, and that's going to be even more expensive. So,
Right.
but yeah, it's going to take a lot of political will to make that happen.
So how is the federal government involved in this?
Well,
Because I-5 is an interstate, so.
right.
Yeah.
So there'll be federal funding that comes to the state for the preferred alternative, and also the Billy Frank Jr. Nisqually National Wildlife Refuge is right there and is a neighbor, and so there's federal property involved. But it's, you know, the Federal Highway Administration will have a say, and our delegation will be in D.C. seeking the funding to make that happen.
Okay. So you mentioned your education program with schools. Are there educational programs that are geared more toward the public, the greater public?
Yeah, certainly. So we have the Nisqually Stream Stewards, which is kind of our adult education program. And currently, we each month have an opportunity, sometimes maybe a lecture or other, you know, learning topic, and then a volunteer opportunity that we ask folks to do. And once you've done enough of the educational opportunities and the volunteer opportunities, we consider you a graduate, and we honor you at the Nisqually Watershed Festival, which is our big festival and celebration of the watershed, the last Saturday in September, and we just had it at the Billy Frank Jr. Nisqually National Wildlife Refuge, and it's been there a while. We had over 1,000 people come and just kind of celebrate the watershed, and a lot of activities to do with children, and we have some years reptiles, some years birds, and Finn, the wild Olympic salmon, which is this giant fiberglass salmon that's just a joy to tow down the road because you get the greatest looks.
Big fish.
We honor you there. So, but it's an opportunity to learn, you know, about Mount Rainier and glaciology, or learn about river, or learn about salmon, and then also take some of that learning and give back to the watershed, whether it's, you know, helping in planting projects or helping with the education project. You know, there's just a variety of opportunities, and then we get you plugged into our partners. Like I said, there's the Nisqually Reach Nature Center, which is, you know, just off the estuary, and does public education. The Friends of the Nisqually National Wildlife Refuge Complex, the Nisqually Land Trust, Nisqually Community Forest, Pierce County has their own stream team. Thurston County has a stream team. Yep. Mm-hmm. So, you know, we are helping build that cadre of engaged volunteers that really they know a little bit more about their environment and why it's important, and want to give their time back to it.
So tell me a little bit about your community partners. This is not something that happens in a vacuum, obviously, and you've mentioned that you have a lot of partnering organizations, but can you share with me, you know, who helps?
Right. Certainly, you know, having those state, local, federal, tribal agencies and knowing people kind of in that mid-level of the agency really helps, so that we can reach out depending on what an issue is, and we know who to talk to, and they can help us get to the right resources, or if it's something that does require some sort of enforcement action, that's the agency's responsibility. So we can kind of be like, hey, people are telling us about this, you need to do something about it. Our education project works really closely with South Sound Green, which does similar work throughout the rest of Thurston County, and the Chehalis Basin Partnership, which works in the Chehalis Basin, but they all work together on our Green Congress, and we work together on a lot of grants. You know, this is it takes a lot of funding, or a lot of different sources of funding to make it work. So we are mostly funded through grants and contracts, but we also take donations. Of course, and the education project is kind of the favorite place for people to put their money into, because everybody likes giving a chance to get kids outdoors. We have a lot of state grant programs. So, but we work together, you know, might be something with the tribe, or with the Land Trust, or with the Nature Center, or with the South Sound Green, you know, to have these collaborative projects, so that we're working together on things.
So are there events coming up in 2025 that you'd like to, you know, give people a heads up about?
Well, I mean, the Stream Stewards class is always ongoing, and so it's something to look for.
When is that usually held?
Well, every month we have an activity, so we'll have a class or a volunteer opportunity. So you have an opportunity to do that, and it's ongoing, and it's kind of plug in as you can, and if you can't be there, that's okay. You'll come into another month, and you know, over a year's worth of activities, it might take you 3 years to come to make sure you get that, you know, chance to go on the watershed tour, or to talk about glaciology or salmon life cycle, or visit our hatchery or the tribe's hatcheries. but you get a chance to do it when it works for you. We used to do it as a class through the summer, and we had a lot of people start and get really excited, but then it wouldn't work, or they'd go on vacation, they'd miss parts of it. So that's why we just have it always ongoing. The Nisqually Watershed Festival, like I said, last week in September, will be an incredible opportunity. We're always looking for volunteers, but we also want folks to just come and be there and experience it. And there's no cost other than food vendors if you want a food. The Citizens Advisory Committee, which is a great way to get plugged in for a citizen, like I said, it's the second Tuesday of every month in the late afternoon. And then the Nisqually River Council, those are open public meetings held throughout the watershed, and those are the third Friday of every month from 9 to noon. And they're now always hybrid, so you can always come via Zoom and figure it out and see if that's something you want to show up in person. Yep. So it gives us, there's a couple that might not be, depending on if we have internet available. Right. But if we have internet, we have a lot of people that come via Zoom, and kind of the positive legacy of the COVID years.
I know.
So
who knew?
Exactly.
We go into that. So you mentioned volunteers for the Watershed Festival. That's a pretty obvious use of a volunteer. There's all kinds of things to do during those kinds of events. But are there other ways that you could use volunteers throughout the year? Other kinds of things you would need volunteers for?
Yeah, and we do that through our stream storage project. And so if you get plugged into that calendar, and you can find it on our website, that's an opportunity. There'll be plantings this fall, or opportunities to put plant protectors on the plants to prevent deer and elk from browsing them, so they're pulling them right back out of the ground, and mice from browsing them, so that they have a chance to be successful. There's just a wealth of opportunities. The Land Trust will get you plugged into that, and they do invasive species pulling on their properties, or we have opportunities for people to be salmon watchers, so they'll pick a site, let us know when the salmon show up and when they stop showing up, so it really helps with learning about run timing. There's been opportunities in the past to work with the tribe at their hatchery to kind of help with the spawning of the salmon. That depends on the year and what they've got going on. So there are a ton of opportunities, and it's going through our website, nisquallyriver.org is the place to find that. We have a calendar, and we keep that updated, and often put our partners' opportunities on there, but if not, we have ways for you to find our partners too.
Good. My husband's a fly fisherman, so I'm sure he would love to be a salmon watcher, because he's always out looking for the fish. So
most of the places they're watching, he's not allowed to catch them, though.
Well, that's
so
okay.
He has to just watch.
He explained to me he's a fisher person, not necessarily a catcher person. So I do have one other question. You mentioned the Citizens Advisory Committee. How do people get on? Are they appointed? Are they elected? How is that? Because there might be folks who'd be really interested in serving in that capacity.
Right. So the way to get involved is to just start showing up. And again, you can get on our email list through our website, nisquallyriver.org, to be a part of that. And if you get involved, the folks there are really passionate. And if you show interest, they're going to pull you in. And then we have a way that the Citizens Advisory Committee self-nominates who they want as their members, and then the River Council at large then approves those. And we've never not approved someone.
How many people on that commission or that committee?
The committee, right now we have room. I think technically it's capped at 24 or something like that. But we want people who are interested in the watershed. If you're willing to come to a meeting once a month and learn more about it, we want to have you there. So, we'll find a space for you.
Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, it's just been a great opportunity to kind of talk about the River Foundation. It's funny because, we run the Nisqually River Council, and so some ways we always are kind of in the background. And the River Council is the big shiny object, and we're just making sure that it works. And so it's really kind of neat to get a chance to talk about who the foundation is and the work that we do. And we do talk about it every month about what we're working on, what the projects are currently ongoing at the River Council. But I really appreciate the opportunity to come and talk with you.
Well, Justin, I want to thank you for taking time out of your schedule. I know you're busy. For being here with us this month on Mission Nonprofit, and wish you the best going forward, because it's a lot of stuff that you folks do with a small staff, and I really am impressed by that.
And somehow we've been doing it for 20 years. I don't know how that happened. But
well, congratulations on that. So, nonprofit organizations in our community help care for our neighbors and children, inform and educate us, enrich our lives with the arts and performances, and help to keep our community safe and healthy. Join us again next month when we introduce you to the important work of another great local organization right here on Mission Nonprofit. I'm Deborah Vinsel, and for all of us here at Thurston Community Media, thanks for watching.